Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTB World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is going to be with reference to the economic situation in the country and, of course, what is going to be the way forward on that front. We've seen the finance minister speak about the positive direction that the economy has taken, of course, with what we've seen in terms of improvement in Fitch ratings, the IMF SLA, and then, of course, also moving forward, the state bank's policy rate improvement. But there is, of course, concern as to what is going to be the long-term direction that this will take and what aspects will be needed to be considered when we talk about this economic growth. And this is what the finance minister also highlighted speaking recently at the SECP inauguration ceremony. He talked about how this is something that we need to focus on, especially when we talk about improving our exports, the domestic markets, the usage of technology, and then, of course, reforms that are much needed in order to make sure that while we remain within this current IMF arrangement, it is the last one. And so this is going to be an important discussion moving forward as to the plan and the direction that this points towards, and whether or not these reforms that we've been hearing about for so many decades now will actually see the light of day. So we're going to be taking a look at that in the first segment and also talk about what improvements have been as we end the first year of the current the first month of the current fiscal year, and see what exactly is the way forward. We've seen good target collections with regards to tax by the FBR, which achieved its target within the first month as to what has been planned for this current fiscal year. But of course, in terms of whether or not that actually includes the kind of reforms or the kind of groups, including, of course, retailers, that the FBR is seeking, is something that still remains to be seen. So we're going to also be talking about that. And then, of course, in terms of what sort of investments and projects with other countries, including China, are also underway, and what sort of impact will they have in the country's economy in the long run. That is going to be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to be taking a look at the developing situation in the Middle East after the murder of Ismail Haniyeh, and what exactly is going to be the way forward when we talk about an escalation of an all-out war in the Middle East, with, of course, different countries involved, including Iran and Lebanon, in which, of course, two attacks have been carried out by Israel targeting particular leaders. And so we want to understand then, when we talk about Hezbollah and Israel, and then, of course, what the situation is in terms of the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and of course Iranian elements involved. This is going to be an important discussion, whether or not there is going to be any US involvement within the region as well. The rhetoric that we've been seeing coming out of the US talks about de-escalation in the region, but at the same time we've seen that the support existed from the US in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks as well, and in what has followed. Of course, we've seen that the Israeli Prime Minister has also been welcomed recently at the US Congress. But what exactly is going to be the way forward in terms of the US being able to maintain that balance of actually talking about a ceasefire, brokering a peace agreement, and to the effect of which we're now seeing is outright attacks that have been carried out in Lebanon and Iran, and whether or not that de-escalation will compel the US to actually put forward its forces within this war. So that is going to be our focus in the next segment of the show today, and we'll try and understand what is going on and what can be expected in the near future. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online for our first segment by Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, who's a senior economist. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan, for joining us in the debate. It's a pleasure having you as always. Let's start, of course, first with reference to what we've seen in terms of the end of the first month of this current fiscal year. There have been, of course, certain improvements in terms of Fitch ratings, in terms of the IMF SLA. There is, of course, improvement in the policy rate, and then there is a good tax collection coming in from the FBR as well. But I want your take on how important and how huge, and then, of course, how sustainable these milestones are when we talk about what is likely going to be the direction that this current fiscal year is going to take.
So, Sana, good to see you guys after some time. IMF SLA is an important, kind of position for Pakistan, considering that this year we needed about $26 billion, and, thereabouts we need in the upcoming years. So it kind of stamps an approval that this financing would be arranged so the external sector challenges remain comfortable. The $26 billion has $12 billion in terms of reprofiling, going on to the next year of the monies that we hold from bilateral countries, from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. There are $4 billion of Chinese and Middle Eastern bank loans, so that's about 16. And the rest of the 10 comes from some loans that we take from the multilaterals and partly the current account. Most of the monies are arranged, and whenever you have an engagement with the fund makes sure that the gross external financing needs of the country are met. There are some in process. The change that you see in Fitch is a result of having been engaged with the fund but having signed the SLA. Just to jog everyone's memory, in 2013, on July 10th, Fitch had upgraded us in a similar manner, and we had just inked an agreement with the IMF. So I keep saying that for the time being, to run Pakistan's economy without the IMF support is probably not a prudent policy. Similarly, what you've seen is a reserve buildup of to $9 billion. Inflation, I think, still is uncomfortable. It's gone down to 11.8% in July. I was just looking at the number, but month on month inflation is still, 2%. It's still on the higher side. Food inflation hasn't subsided as much as one would like. And, the energy prices and all are still, hovering around. The IMF agreement comes at the back of a tough budget, undoubtedly. We have been pushed in terms of taxation. Just for people to understand, in the press release that IMF has given, the word tax comes 11 times. So that's the kind of emphasis they've put on the taxation side. And that's why you see personal income tax rates going up. You see the non salaried rates going up. A good effort on the agriculture sector, on the real estate sector, on the retail sector. So those are the good taxes because we've been undertaxing or not taxing these areas. But what you see is the result that FPR exceeded by almost $1.5 billion, I think, the July target, despite a slowdown, and the high frequency indicators do show that there is a slowdown in the economy. I was looking at the OMC sales; they are down. The petroleum product sales, the electricity sales are down year on year for 2 years. But despite that, FPR making that kind of money kind of shows the kind of heavy taxation that we had to go through. 1,700 billion rupees in new taxes this year. That's definitely a huge amount, and the rest would come from the autonomous growth that happens in the economy. So that's on the taxation side. I think both the IMF and the authorities are slow on the expenditure reforms, which means they've done something on the pension, but we need to do something with the provinces. We need to do something on the targeting of subsidies. We need to do something on the debt reprofiling in general. Um, all these things, the current account, the current expenditures, taking them up by 24% probably wasn't the best way to go ahead. We jacked up PSDP quite a bit. I had always said this 1,500 billion was not needed. We've brought it down to 1150. Now it will fall to 1100. We've taken another 50 billion out. On the expenditure side, I think the fund's been, the thought process probably has been these are longer terms and we can't see much happening immediately. The government's into committees trying to do something, a fiscal pact with the provinces. These are all the important things moving forward. Let's hope that the government and both the fund get on with it and do something. What has come to bite us, and I've always said that Pakistan's energy sector doesn't need a reform, it needs reformation, it needs reorganization. The Urdu word is tanzeem no. I was giving a lecture today at a place and they said the English word is reorganization. From selling of discos, from the tariff reform, from using gas effectively, from targeting of subsidies, negotiating with the IPPs, there is a broad range of things to do, and the necessity to do them is there. Everyone's uncomfortable. 70 rupees, 60 rupees, these kind of tariffs are untenable. So we need to do all the things that I've just mentioned. IPPs is just one part of the whole supply chain. The rest needs a much broader framework. So
Absolutely.
all in all, just last comment is that macro stability has been cemented. Good signs are there, but the uncertainties both on the political front and on the energy sector are causing a bit of discomfort to the general public.
Right. Dr. Saab, first of all, good to actually great to see you after quite some time. And I'm glad that you actually mentioned that you are uncomfortable with inflation the way it is. Help us understand, or actually help us solve a riddle. When we look at the numbers that are put out by PBS, it seems that inflation is going down, and they keep on saying that the core inflation is considerably down. But that doesn't seem to be an average man's lived experience. When I go out in the market, I can't find anything that might have actually gone cheaper. Is it that we have actually reconfigured our parameters or something of that sort? That's why we are seeing this kind of decline in inflation core numbers, or something else is going on?
And Dr. Khaqan, if you can allow me, of course, welcome to our show once more. And has it got a lot to do with the inflation when we talk about the domestic economy? It's not flourishing. Of course, people are not buying, and the buying power of people is going down and down. And in that context, as you have earlier mentioned, that the economy is very slow. Has it got a lot to do with inflation, or there are other factors as well?
And by the way, inflation is important because it is becoming a political factor all over the world. And it seems to be having an impact on political outcomes from India to America.
So certainly, so what is happening in inflation, right? So the average rise in prices, the CPI, in the year FY23 was 29%. So that is what the people first felt. Come FY24, which we just closed in June, at the end of June, the prices rose another 23.4% on top of the 29%. So that's what the average Joe in Pakistan felt, right? Now, then the government would say, or the authorities would tell you that inflation, the rate of growth of prices in FY25, which we have just started, would be around 11.5 to 13.5%. Let's pick up 12.5%. So the average person has felt 29, 23, and now 12.5% this year. So his rate of growth of prices has subdued, but the prices are still growing, and albeit growing at double digits. That is what the common man, that is what even the middle income earner, and even to some extent the high income earner is now facing. His buying power has eroded from being somewhere at 100,000 to 60 odd thousand rupees as they have moved forward. So they are uncomfortable. But at the same time, what has happened is that the taxation impact has also taken part of your money away from you, because the readjustment that has happened has affected people up till 500,000 the most. So that's why people are still uncomfortable. And this is an average. The electricity, for example, has gone up by approximately average again 25% just in July. You are still getting those bills. Just imagine that the authorities, I was just reading in a notification, are saying, okay, in the July and August bills, please pay them 10 days late. So, because everyone understands that paying those bills would be very harsh. So, the average man and woman in Pakistan are feeling this jolt. And that, coupled with what Faisal is saying, there is a slowing in the economy. So, look at your growth rate last year, 2.4%. So, 2.4% means that you will, on the average, a 1% growth rate in an economy creates about 400,000 jobs in the economy. So let's say 2% created 800,000 jobs. on the average, every year, 2 million at the minimum enter your workforce. So, to answer Faisal's point, the slowing of the economy is then felt by those people who don't get employment. So, if 2 million enter and just 800,000 jobs are created, then they are more uncomfortable with how the economy is behaving. So, all in all, the distress or the pressures on the earners or the new entrants is both heavier than it was a few years ago. And that's why there is certain challenge which we have to overcome. The
Right.
next
I,
3 years,
yeah.
yeah.
I just wanted to paraphrase what you were saying for a layman. The rate of acceleration of price growth might have actually gone down, but the real time effect of high prices hasn't. So the common man is finding it more difficult to actually survive in this economy, and this doesn't seem to be a concern of any government at all, sir.
And Dr. Khaqan, I want to mention one other point as well, that even the elite class, I must say, because the people who are doctors and having their own hospitals, they can be considered as service providers, but they are elite class of our society. What I have experienced very recently is that one of my family members, of course, she went through a gallbladder operation, and the amount we paid for it, it was double the amount of what we paid for another family member last year. So it means that the elite class, they are charging people in accordance with the dollar rates rather than the money itself. But people at large, they are suffering at the hands of these people who are, of course, providing these services.
So, to answer your question first, things have become more expensive also because a number of sales tax exemptions that existed on the medical equipment, on the medical supplies, which meant, they were at zero sales tax, have gone to 10, 15, or 18%. So that's one aspect. Whenever that happens, people have a tendency, for example, milk has been talked about a lot. People have a tendency that if 50 rupees of tax is slapped, they increase the price by maybe 70 rupees. So that's why, especially on the imported things, this tendency has been seen. And since in general people are importing less because of constraints, there is a tighter market, and the prices of maybe the surgical equipment and others have gone up substantively. And that's true. So, what you have felt, Faisal, is right. And as I keep saying, their buying power has eroded, but things have become more expensive. It's kind of difficult. And the kind of rises that we have seen in electricity over the last 2 3 years have pushed the pricing of hospitals probably quite hard. And so their charges have gone up substantively. So that is absolutely true. That's why I'm glad you mentioned this. I said it's not only the low income or the middle income earners, but even the higher income earners have been hurt because substantive change has been seen in the kind of price rises that we have seen. When your inflation is running at 29, 24, and 15%, in 3 years, so that means the value of 100,000 after 1 year became 77, then it became 61, and after this year would come down to about 54,000 rupees. So everyone's feeling that pinch. Um, Having said that, what you said, Pitafi Saab, is absolutely right. So there is a decline in the rise of the way the prices are rising, but it is on top of what they have been rising initially. So that has to be kept in mind. All in all, the way out of this is that energy sector needs to be sorted out so that the rate of rise that we have seen can be curtailed. Number one, the fiscal needs to be sorted out when the government is borrowing continuously and borrowing at the rate that we have been borrowing, and the kind of fiscal deficits that we are running, that has to come down so that the government doesn't become a big borrower. Third, our productivity levels have to go up so that food prices are, in the manageable range. Fourth, we are continuing with a policy of tighter monetary stance so that demand remains subdued in the country. And that also keeps the rupee stable so that imported inflation doesn't hurt. I think that's the overall stance in which the country will be in the coming 6 months at least. Um, but people have to find new sources of income. One, people have to go solar. Two, at whatever level they go, whether they use fewer units. I think solarization is one true way forward for almost everyone now. The net metering still makes sense on the consumer side. The batteries will become much cheaper. The solar has become cheaper. So that's one. The second way out of this, these two ways combined, increasing your income, solarization, seems to be till at least the middle income earners. I think this is the way out of the problems that they are in on the personal side. And of course, curtailing the way we live still has to continue till the growth comes back into the economy. But the estimates of growth that both the government and the IMF have given to us are not very encouraging in the coming years.
Right.
This year, uh, so let's hope that some revival happens.
Right, and Dr. Khaqan, I'm glad you pointed out things that we can possibly do, but believe me, we've been trying to increase our income, but that's a hard one that you've put forward for all of us. But let's also talk a little bit about the tax that you were earlier referring to, especially when we talk about the kind of aspects that are important. And I want to focus first on the scheme for traders that, of course, was announced, and we saw that at the end of July was that deadline, but the collection that we've seen in terms of the income tax has been a mere rupees 1,500, and that's only from 3 traders. At the same time, we've also seen that there is also the imposition of taxes the government put forward, 2.5%, I believe, withholding tax on the supplies to the retailers, and we're not really sure how much of that was actually collected in the data that we're plugging in for the first month of the fiscal year. And I want your taking on both of these aspects, because when we talk about improvements in reforms or improvements in aspects of tax collection, this is a major one that needs to be done, but it seems that successfully we are failing to actually bring them under the tax net. Why is that so, that even this time around when we boast these numbers, we're unable to actually bring them in, and what then will be the possible remedy moving forward?
So on the income side, and I may have said it on a lighter tone, but I am very, very serious that all the members of the households have to start thinking
Yeah.
how they can pitch in. A lady who does some tuitions because she's done her graduation may help. I am talking about the very nitty gritty of life. A
Gig
guy who's
economy. Gig
yeah,
economy,
gig,
sir.
gig economy is very, very helpful. Exactly. So, you can sit at home and do this, right? From teaching Quran to teaching anything, if you've learned it, teach it. That's the best to do. And these graduates and these undergraduates that are roaming about, so that's something they have to seriously consider. And there are lots of opportunities for this online, otherwise, going to people, that's something to do. And everyone has to think what is the best possible way to increase their incomes. They can start selling pies from their house, that's, or whatever they want to do. Because times are not going
I'm
to get
telling you, Dr. Hakan, Farrukh might actually be able to do something like that. He's a great cook, so we've
Very,
heard.
very good cook.
Yes, please go ahead.
I say that in a manner where we can really persuade people to get out and think what they can do. On the second, I mean, if my son's done his A levels, he can teach O levels, right? I mean, that's something he can do. Maybe he can be useful on the taxation side. So look, I mean, I think enough's enough now. 3.2 million retailers in the country, hardly 300,000 of them, in the registration, and 40,000 paying tax out of that. I mean, time has really passed. These excuses are not going to work anymore. We can't keep on having a begging bowl to the world when they tell us that 3 million of your own retailers and wholesalers need to get into the system. And here I stand completely behind any government, and I stand behind the state. If they want to go full force, they should, by all means. Whatever happens, people don't want to open their shop, good for them. They can't survive for more than 10 days doing that. But it is unfair that you tax my income at source, and then there are all these 3 million people who do business and are not taxed. So government has to move on that. Even in the current last 2 years, we've delayed this, but we shouldn't. We have the data, we must go after them. That's one thing. Similarly, on the agriculture income tax, it just cannot be anymore that the total amount kept in the two budgets of Punjab and Sindh, where we collect it, is a mere 9.5 billion rupees, when the whole country is about to pay 13,000 billion rupees of tax. I mean, for God's sake, let's have a heart. We really need to think this through. Agriculture income tax should be a federal subject, and the FBR, however bad an institution, it still is going to collect 13,000 billion this year, or attempt. So that's the second part. The third part, and I still say this, we've let our retailers agriculture income tax and the real estate still off the hook. The real estate, Sana, this year is paying a capital gains tax of 15%. The higher income salary bracket people are going to be paying 39%. The non-salaried guy who makes a shoe and sells it, if he's a big seller, then that non-salaried guy will pay 49% in terms of his income.
And
So let's
Dr.
have a
Saab,
heart.
this 15%, is it on supply side or demand side?
So this is the capital gains that is paid by the seller on the amount of the transaction that happens, which itself is underreported in Pakistan. So
And
we are
where
still.
does the role, sorry, Dr. Saab, where does the role of a realtor actually fall here, or land developer?
So land developers, they are now trying to negotiate and bring in a tax regime, and have a proper tax on that. And I think they're still figuring out how to reach a final consensus on that. So that itself, the here's the very simple truth about taxation: all incomes should be taxed horizontally equally. That's just the simple rule. And vertically, it means that all incomes as they rise should pay a higher amount. Now, this basic principle, 15% on real estate, retailers outside, 39% higher income, personal income tax people, non-salaried 49%, manufacturing, I think 29% or something. What are we trying to do? So horizontal equity has to come through. And, we can blame the government for not being able to do, many governments, I mean, for decades, but it's also the people who have to now have a heart and start, paying their due share. We are literally forced to do all this. If we don't, there is no survival. And then we will keep on taxing through indirect taxation, through sales tax, the people who are already in the tax net. So, and then I keep saying, here's the good story. The good story is that Pakistan is very data rich. Nadra data, what do I know about Pitafi Saab? When he travels, I know his data. His bank accounts, I know his bank accounts. His family tree, I know his family tree. When he buys a car, I know that he's bought a car. When he buys property, I know he's bought property. When he has a remittance, I know he has remittance. His salary, I know. I know everything about you. All I need to now do
Just out
is.
of curiosity, you are talking about government of Pakistan or yourself, sir?
I mean government of Pakistan. So
Because you
what I
singled
mean.
me out, I just wanted to know.
No. So we know everything about these people. Someone has to, and that's the great part of Pakistan. We have already digitized and digitalized this data. Digitized mean we have collected and we have this data. Now, and you know all this about me. You know all this about the people who are in the net. Now someone has to say that a pre-populated Dr. Khaqan's tax year regime says the following. And if I'm okay, I will be okay. If I am not okay, we apply the markers, then I should be asked and to explain my income. If I can, that's fine too. So when we know so much about everyone, then we have no excuse not to go after these people. This data is with the government of Pakistan. I'm proud that my country has this kind of data. The NIC, the ID cards, everything is there. That's the good part. That's the good part of the story. Now we have to act on this data and then go after those high net worth people who are not there. Then, come down to the others. Similarly, in the manufacturing, similarly in the agri side, and things would start looking better. Now, that's a tough call. As I say, these are the hard choices, Pitafi Saab. Rising Raising the prices or raising policy rates are the easier choices because you just do them with a stroke of pen. But when you want to ask someone to do this data mining, that's the tough call Pakistan has to make. I am really hoping that we make that tough call.
Dr. Khaqan, as you know, I always come up with the questions related to my own personal experiences. Very recently, one of my cousins, she's from, of course, UK, and she is developing her own brand, and she's a businesswoman. She contacted me and she said that she actually wants few people for her digital marketing for her brand, which is obviously pivotal in the Western business sectors, is pivotal for business itself. She asked me if I could help her form a team for digital marketing that she required. I actually went around seeking people and I couldn't find. Then there was this friend, he helped me out, and we managed to sort of get her on the call with somebody. But what I was thinking at that time is that now our skill development sector, it is not working on these things. For especially earlier you talked about that all of the family members, they need to work. I was thinking about females working from home. I mean, they can play an excellent role with the digital marketing sector if they are having this skill. And of course, when we talk about future, it is all about digital marketing. It is all about selling your skills online, selling your skills from home rather than going to a work. So are we really working on this skill development, number one? And number two, do we have the tools to sort of represent ourselves that we are a country that actually have these qualities, have these skills, and we are ready to give it to other countries as well?
Faisal, by the way, just I understand, Sana, you want to speak. I just wanted to confirm what Faisal was saying. Unfair, Faisal. I think you didn't look close enough. Did you go to LinkedIn or, for that matter, Fiverr? Because there are teams of people sitting there. Amazing people, amazing talent. You could have put together many people, a team actually. If you didn't look, it doesn't mean Pakistan doesn't have the kind of talent that is needed.
Absolutely. And actually, I would also like to add that a lot of that also boils down to empowerment of women, because unfortunately, even when we talk about women working from home, many are not given that liberties. But I take Dr. Khaqan's opinion on that as well. But add to that, Dr. Khaqan, something that we were discussing earlier, because I want you to address that first before we move on to this one, is the property valuation rates as well, which were revised but not notified by the FBR, which we saw has resulted in a loss by the FBR's collection by about 2.5 billion rupees. And it, of course, was pointed towards, the delay was pointed towards the fact that there was a revision in criteria of the build-up area. But then again, this is money that we've lost.
And Dr. Saab, mashallah, you are very gifted. So you will not mind me adding to this quantity of questions as well. One thing that actually stands out is the property given by the government of Pakistan to the hoteling sector. It seems that while they charge an arm and a leg, the property that is allocated to them is actually on nominal charges for 100 years. Government of Pakistan has no plan to actually start charging the proper money for that.
So let's start with the Faisal's first point. So here's the first point. IT smart people, good people, if you talk to the IT specialists with 20, 25 years of experience, they will tell you they find it hard to find very skilled people. The people who come out of our universities are not up to the level of international work. So the upgrade there is very much needed if this has to, not become a bottleneck as we move forward. Digital marketing and all other areas fall in that kind of training. So this is a concern of the IT sector. It's a genuine concern. Now, how can we skill train in the next 2 years is something that I'm hoping that the IT ministry, along with Pasha is the IT organization which works in the private sector, they're well organized, good, smart people, how they can work this through. So that's one thing. My take on this, as I always say, someday when we have to do it, here's my big idea on this. I think internet should be an essential service in Pakistan, and the government should spend all the money that it wants to, and every young boy or girl should have access to AI learning, to digital marketing, to these kinds of skills. They can do it out of their house. This is like a remittance coming to Pakistan, people working out of Pakistan. We've kept the taxation bare minimum on them, I think 1% of what they get. So, this is something that we must. Internet services have to be really, really upgraded. And yes, there are disturbances, security concerns are there. That's how we live. That's fine. But the internet access, the internet availability, the pricing, this is something the government must be thinking. So that's that. Both IT graduates, but internet access. On the property, I am very always uncomfortable with the way we treat property, the property pricing. We have so many values. We have a DC value, we have the FBR value, and then we have the actual commercial transaction value. All these three are different. We have come a long way in upgrading the FBR and the DC values much closer to the commercial value. Um, Sana, you would be surprised that in the government, I remember putting this on the table. We said that if the value is so low, the government should have the first right. You sell something and you declare, 50 lakh rupees when you sold it for 150 lakh rupees, then the government should say that we, on a certain price higher than what you have received, we will be able to buy that property and reverse that transaction.
So
Never
government
came into
shufa.
force.
Doctor Sahab, government shufa then, the kind of
Yeah,
shufa that we do.
yeah. So, so,
Okay.
so we never came in doing it, but that's something to think about for Pakistan. On the hotel bit and all, but Afisa, this is a very very delicate business, and we have to zoom out of this. How do we actually develop our cities, right? We have developed horizontal cities. Zoning itself is, a terrible issue in Pakistan. We are not letting people go high, and that's why we are spreading and taking precious land. So holistically, someone has to see what it means to have a modern city with less spread out, but going vertical. Line losses are less, commute is less, and the centered activities happen within. You know how you hear about central business district or city centers. We have not been able to make those. So cities like Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, Gujranwala, Sialkot need to think about it. All of them have to go on high rise. Our hotels, look at your Serena, they're still spread. You go 4 floors and then that's it, or you go 5 floors, or you look at other hotels. So we have to start thinking different. These are city hotels. City hotels or business hotels have to go high. And then the rents charged on them have to be more commensurate with today, because these leases have been issued for hundreds of years and then they kept getting renewed at very, very minimal prices. So city planners again have to be brought into CDAs, LDAs, which still, in the end, all the things that I've talked to you about today, these are doable things. But Pakistan is in a competence challenge. I always still maintain that city development is a subject that very few people in Pakistan would know how to do. We need proper city planners inducted into CDAs, LDAs, KDAs who do this for us and show us a 10 to 15-year map of how these cities would look with high rises, with services around. We think removing barriers and fast lanes, it's maybe public transport, trams, and walkways which are going to solve your issues, or
Very
EV
quickly,
buses, or you know
absolutely, Dr. Saab, very quickly, do you think that cost like lease cost like 250 rupees per square foot per 100 years? Is that a fair lease in Islamabad?
so it's like the IPP's bit. We need to open these agreements and revise them.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, for joining us and being a part of the
Thank you
show.
very
It's a pleasure having you as always, and thank you for all the insight. We're now going to be moving on to our next segment that takes a look at what is the aftermath of the murder of Ismail Haniyeh and, of course, the attacks that we've seen in Lebanon and Iran, and, of course, the possibility of an escalation. And Faisal, we've talked about this before as well in terms of what can possibly happen. But the U.S. element is also important because we've been seeing that there is a call for de-escalation. But in terms of the possibility of that not happening, what sort of involvement do you see by the US?
Yes, Sana, obviously it is, the statements are coming from US itself, is that they want the de-escalation, but at the same time they believe that if Israel is attacked by Iran, then they will of course go to any length to safeguard Israel from Iran.
But will they not go to any length to stop that from happening because they don't want to be part of this war?
Yeah, that's what needs to be of course talked about. And when we talk about US role that should have been played in terms of de-escalation, they did not play previously. Rather, they have been of course investing in the conflict itself, because they were the ones who were sending in the arms, and they were hand in glove with Israel when it comes to this genocide against the people of Gaza. So now looking at the whole Middle East, I mean, one thing is for sure that there is a sentiment within Iran that it should be avenged and the revenge is going to be taken. This is what the slogans are right now coming out from Iran. But overall, if we see at the picture, then I would recommend, as most of the voices are recommending, that if there is a chance after this assassination and the one of the supremos of Hezbollah's assassination, I think it is fair enough to go for a ceasefire, to go for normalization, to go for, of course, end to this war, because in a way Israel has achieved the ultimate, and that was to, of course, assassinate or eliminate the Hamas top leader, which they have done so. Now is the time that they should be the ones who should come up with this, and at the same time I think it would be a fair enough situation for people of Gaza as well, because they have been going through, they are the immediate sufferers when it comes to this genocide, and they should be given their land back, and the whole troops of IDF that are penetrated inside Gaza, they must vacate that place, and of course the rebuilding should start. This is the ideal situation, but I am afraid that the kind of escalation which can happen in coming days, the earlier signs of it are already starting, and them earlier signs are that only an hour ago there were a few of the missiles fired from Hezbollah side in the Israel in the retaliation of whatever it happened there yesterday. So to me, I think it is hard to see that, but everyone needs to be sane enough for the larger interest of people of Gaza.
Right, absolutely. And Farrukh, I want your take on whether or not this can possibly lead to a more sincere effort by the US towards ceasefire in Gaza.
You know, I heard Faisal saying that U.S. failed in de-escalating. I don't think that the U.S. has failed. It actually goes down to the fact that, remember that movie called Bruce Almighty, where a man is given all the powers of God, but then they are told that you cannot mess with anybody's free will, right? When you have a pig-headed leader like Netanyahu, who is actually hell-bent on manipulating everything just to survive in politics. A country like America that considers Israel as one of its closest allies. I haven't been able to understand why, but that is how things are. Because of that, they cannot actually start sanctioning or attacking it, right? So in the end, what happens? You end up either withdrawing or withholding the weapons that they did for a bit, or then you try to put as much diplomatic pressure as possible. So that bit also happened, but of course there are limits to what you can achieve through those means unless you are ready to confront a leader who is hell-bent on killing so many people just to survive in politics. Now, regarding the U.S. actually defending Israel, let us be honest, even when America is not defending Israel, it is defending Israel. Yeah. Whose weapon is this? All the weapon from Iron Dome to everything else actually comes from America or its allies. So it is guaranteed that when Israel comes under attack, and I don't understand what is the point of lobbing so many missiles at Israel every time you try, because they have Iron Dome, they have better technology, and they take it down within lightning speed. Now, we have spoken about Israel. Let us also, given that Israel, whatever Israel did was in violation of international law, it was shameful, whatever, but it also puts Iran and Hamas in an awkward position also. Because it was Israel from day one that was repeatedly saying that behind the Hamas attacks, there was Irani support. And what happens? They kill that man, their leader of Hamas, in Iran, right? So how does it actually play out in the Western press? To the Western people, it actually plays out as, look, this is a proof, it is a smoking gun. And after that, if Iran actually tries to escalate, and it can of course do it, it has proxies, it has wherewithal to actually start doing it, it endangers its own security in such a way that it might further become a target, A. B, it might also create a kind of environment where other side starts uniting. So far everybody is looking at Gaza and they are not actually trying to stand with Israel, right? At least there is a healthy distance. Even France, even European countries would actually say that stop this genocide, stop killing people, stop this war, ceasefire. But if you actually do something of that sort, which is by the way pointless,
right?
In the end, what happens? In the end, you end up actually bringing all the anti-Iran elements together. So I think that, one, I don't understand why Haniyeh was invited into Tehran. He shouldn't have been, right? Because it doesn't play out well. Then you also failed on so many levels in intelligence that they managed to do it in your country. And the third thing, it shows you the tricky business of policing the regions under your control or influence all over the world, and then policing your own people.
Right.
That becomes, very difficult.
Right.
And that's why Iran is also in difficulty.
Absolutely. Thank you, Farrukh. Thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate today. And of course, much remains to be seen as to how the situation will evolve, but we'll be here to talk about it. We'll now see you tomorrow.